everybody. Welcome to another episode of You Don't Know Squatch.
Great to be back. How have you been, Josh?
All right. We're hoping the audio sounds a little bit better for everybody out there. We're trying a new technique.
Yep.
Big shout out to YouTube for that. You know, you can find everything on YouTube.
And big shout out to all of you who've joined us on YouTube and Instagram.
Right.
We've had a lot of new people coming on. So
that's insane. It has been a while. We have been busy. The COVID thing, and plus we were, I would say, shooting backwoods again.
Yes.
We got a new actor, and we're starting to
try and finish that film. But now the winter has come upon us again. So we'll see.
COVID, man.
But
2020.
We're convinced that we'll get this backwoods project finished. It's just going to take some perseverance.
Well, speaking of backwoods, you have an eyewitness on the phone today.
I do.
Your call will be answered in the order it was received.
Hey, we got a treat. We've got Branden Brummett, who I met actually through his dad a number of years ago. His dad came in the store. This is way back, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And he had a story to tell me about an experience they had at a campground near Bailey, in Bailey, really, in the limits of Bailey, that had to do with his son and his son's daughter. And so, in talking with Branden, he's got more than that story to tell us. So, I'm excited to hear these other stories, which I have not heard yet.
So, hey, Branden, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good this morning. How are you?
Alrighty.
So we're excited to hear. I'm excited because Meridian Campground, where the first story I think you're going to tell us, or the first couple of stories, is very close to where I live right now. It's probably 2 miles from my house, and so. Why don't you just start with the first incident, which was before the one I didn't know about, and then tell us about the one that happened in 15, and then we'll go from there. But just, bring us into what happened as far as you remember.
Sure. It was 2006, Labor Day weekend, and I had been working at that time on the ambulance in Bailey. And I was working that Friday night, and the next morning my family was going to come up and meet with me, and I was going to go and find a camp spot for the rest of the weekend. And I got off that morning, and I went up and looking for a place to camp, and locals up there were saying, hey, check out Camp Meridian and up in that area. And we got up to Camp Meridian and found a spot. The campground was probably about half full. And then the family came up and met with us and with me. And so we went and set camp. If you know Camp Meridian, right when you come in where the pay box is at, the road kind of goes to the right and it banks around. And we were actually on that left side, closer to the meadow there.
So it makes a big loop, doesn't it? I believe. Yeah,
big loop, and then you have the bathrooms and things
right
kind of in the center. And we found a spot. I'm trying to remember the exact number. It might have been 12 or 13. I can't remember. But at any rate, we found the spot, and we set camp, and everything seemed to be just fine. And there was a fifth wheel. People came with a fifth wheel, just a couple spots over from us. And, the first night, they had the generators going and whatnot. And, it seemed pretty fine. No issues the first night, and had a great day. And then Saturday, we were out and about, and then came back to camp and decided that that second night, the other campers, I think, was okay too. And then Sunday night, it was because we were camping into Labor Day, and Sunday night, people with the fifth wheel, they left, and a lot of people kind of left the campground, and we were probably, there was probably, I don't know, 6, 7 people, different camps in the campground. And I had it was my mother-in-law at the time, and we had my kids' cousin, Ariel. She was 12 at the time, and my daughter was 6. So that put my son at about 4 years old.
Okay.
And then it was myself and my ex-wife. So Saturday night, or Sunday night, we went to bed, went to sleep. Just before that, though, I'm sitting around the campfire, and I had my dog, Lola. She was a boxer. And while the girls were getting the kids ready for bed over at the bathrooms, I'm sitting by the campfire, and I'm watching my dog she's just like freaking out. And she kept alerting to the tree line just on the other side of the meadow. And she, I had her, tied up to the tree, and she's just, raking back and forth. She's whimpering, she's whining. And I'm trying to figure out what is over there that's driving my dog nuts, So at any rate, we decided to go to sleep, and I had this little blow up, like type Klondike little dog house, and we had a big 3-room tent, and we were all sleeping in the same tent. And my dog was at my feet, and she was sleeping in her little dog house. It was kind of chilly that night, and we all go to sleep. It must have been close to 3:00 in the morning. I started hearing the neighborhood dogs they're going nuts. They're barking and whining, and if you know the area, which I'm sure you do, Jim, there's a house.
Yeah, there's a couple of houses not far from the campground.
Right, and there's a house that's right across the street from the entrance of Camp Meridian.
Yes. Yep.
And in those days, they had an outdoor, chain link dog run, and it was those dogs that were just losing their minds. And I kind of noticed that, and then I started hearing this screaming, and it was so loud, and kind of that you can feel the vibration in your body. It was that loud, and I never heard anything like this before. I've lived in the mountains. And I'm trying to think to myself, well, what would be making that noise? And I'm going through in my head all of these things, what it might be.
And it must have. Everyone in the campground must have heard it.
I don't see how they couldn't. And the thing is it sounded like a woman screaming for help. It almost sounded like the word help. And that's what kind of startled me and woke me up, is hearing that, and then hearing these dogs just going nuts. And I'm laying there, and my first thought was, oh my God, there's someone who needs help. There's something happening. And then my second thought was like, wait a minute, it's not quite human. I just hear this loud screaming, and it was like, help, help, and it was repetitious. It just, same tone, same volume, and it just continuous. So then, my wife at the time, she wakes up, and she says to me, she goes, is that a woman screaming for help? She goes, do you hear that? And I'm like, yeah. And she says, wait a minute, it doesn't sound quite human. I'm like, no. And meanwhile, the kids are, dead asleep, and there's not a noise out of my dog. Lola was the type of dog, she was alert to the wind, and she was dead silent, which I thought was really odd. And there was some other campers that were closer to the entrance. They had 2 boxers as well. And then there was these people that were in the center of the campground who also had a dog. And you didn't hear a peep out of any of the dogs in the campground. And I just, that kind of struck me kind of funny. I was like, you would think they would be responding to that. And so this goes on for a while, and I'm laying there thinking, I'm the only male. I don't know what that is, and at that time it's like, I have no way to defend us. I have no weapons. I have, and it was a little unnerving because I'm not really sure what that is that we're hearing. So then finally the screaming stops, and we start going back and kind of falling back asleep. And, and again, my mother-in-law didn't say a word either. So it was just me and my wife at the time, having this whisper-type conversation. So we go back to sleep, and then I wake up to this sniffing sound at the foot of my bed, and which was facing the front door of the tent, and that was right where my dog is as well. And the only thing that's between me and this sniffing is the nylon tent, and that's it. So I'm like, holy crap, what is that? And you hear it just sniff type, and then it's like it was clearing its palate or something. It was like, and then it goes, ugh. And at that point, I'm about ready to pee my pants. I'm like, what is that? Oh my God. And you're thinking, is that a bear? What is that? And it does that twice. And I'm at the point where I don't want to move. I don't know what to do. And then I hear it, and it walks all the way around our tent. And it sounded like human type footsteps, on 2 feet, and that was really unnerving as well. And I'm trying to look and see if I can see a shadow in the moonlight, trying to do the tent or something. And I can't see anything, but I can hear it walk all the way around our tent, and I'm thinking, how am I going to protect my family here, and then it just kind of walks off. So then it heads off. We start hearing the screaming ensue again, and this time it's coming directly from where the front of our tent's facing. Before, it was kind of off to, as we were laying down, off to our left, and now it's like directly out in front of us where the tent's facing. And I'm like, good Lord, what is going on here? And same thing. It was that help type sounding scream. And this went on for a while again, and at this point I'm just laying there like praying for the sun to come up. I'm just like, okay, this has been a rough night. Just stop.
What time was it when it was walking around?
It was before daybreak.
Okay, so maybe
and
4 or something like that.
Maybe 4:30, yeah. And then, because again, this is Labor Day weekend, so then the sun finally breaks. And the first thing I do is unzip the tent, and I get out and I'm looking around and I'm trying to evaluate. Is there anything out of place? Are the cars okay? And was it an intruder? Was it, what was it? And I can't see anything that seems to be wrong. And, and I'm looking off to the direction where I heard the screaming from, and, and I don't see anything. And so I decided to start kind of building a campfire. It's early morning. It's pretty chilly. The meadow grass and stuff had frost on it, a little bit of frost on it, and grew. And, and I'm looking around, and I'm not seeing anything. And the rest of the family's getting up, and I'm building a campfire, and, we're kind of talking a little bit. And I hear my mother-in-law, and she's like, something got in the trash. And I'm thinking to myself, that's weird, because I don't see any trash on the ground. And we had a plastic bag tied up in the tree about 6 foot probably. And, we just had some styrofoam and things that we had rinsed off that we didn't want to burn or anything, and in that trash bag. And she just made that comment, and I'm trying to figure that one out. I'm like, that's weird, because the bag's still hanging in the tree, So, meanwhile, the kids kind of get my attention at this point, and they want to go look for firewood. And it was my daughter and Ariel, and I was like, okay, but I want you guys to stay where I can see you. Don't get out of my view, because I'm a little nervous about what happened.
Sure.
The night before, and I'm like, I don't know what we were dealing with. And they said, okay. I said, don't go any farther. Don't get out of my view. And I'm watching them, and I'm thinking it's probably okay. They got the dog, and Ariel's 12. She's older, and they go walking off in the direction where I had heard the screams, it's in the early morning hours. And I'm watching them, and they kind of go up, and there's like a little bit of a ridge there, and they go walking up the ridge, and then they stop. And at that point, I look down, and I start stoking the fire a little bit, and I look up, and they're running as fast as they can back to the camp. And my dog, and they're going as fast as their little legs can take them. And Ariel comes running up, and she's trying to catch her breath, and she's looking a little pale. I'm like, "Are you okay, sweetie? What's going on?" And she's catching her breath, and she says, I saw something. And I'm like, "Okay. Well, what did you see?" And she says, "Well, we were up on that ridge right there." And I said, "Yeah, I saw you." And she says, "And Ari was to my right, and Lola, the dog, was to my left." And I said, "Okay." And she goes, "And there was this tree right in front of me." I'm like, "Okay." And she goes, and then she stops, and she's trying to find her words to how to describe this. And she goes, and this thing stepped out from behind the tree and looked at it. And I said, "Okay." And she says it was like a man, but he had no clothes on, and he had hair all over his body. And us adults, we're looking at each other like, "What?"
You don't hear that every day.
No, and Ariel is not the type of kid that just makes up things.
Sure.
She was very, very factual, and we're looking at each other, and, as adults, and we're like, that sounds like, we're like trying to whisper amongst ourselves, like, and I said, "Well, Ariel," I said, "Well, was it a bear?" And she was like, No, it wasn't a bear. It wasn't a bear. And she goes, and its arms were long. And she goes, "I could see his face, but he had hair all over his body, and he had no clothes on." And she's describing this to me. And meanwhile, my daughter, at 6 times, she goes, "Dad, let's go see it. Let's go see it." And I said, "Ari, hold on a minute, hold on." At this point, this is even more unnerving considering the events of the night. And I was like, and she's like, "Dad, you promised we'd go hiking." I'm like, I understand, Ari. I said, we'll go in a minute. Let's finish breakfast. And I'm like, "Are you okay, Ariel?" And she's like, "Yeah." It took a little bit to calm her down. And we sat and we had our breakfast. And, the other camp people, one thing I noticed, everybody else in the campground was like, they weren't messing around. They were packing up their gear. They were getting out. It was like, it's Monday morning, and, it's like, almost like they weren't hanging out to make breakfast or do anything. They're like, gonna dip. I saw one family kind of walk off the back side and kind of hike around a little bit. But other than that, the majority of the people in the campground were like, it was almost like they were bugging out, So we get done with breakfast, and I said, okay, we'll go. So we all go walking up to that ridge where the kids were, and Ariel gets to the spot. She said, "I was standing right here," and she stomps her little foot, She goes, "And Ari was right there," and points to her right. And then she goes, "And Lola was right there." And then she goes, "It's that tree right there." I'm looking at this tree, and it's less than 30 feet from her. Less than 30 feet. So whatever she saw, I don't see how she could mistaken anything but other than what she saw. And I'm asking her, I said, "Well, what did it do?" And she was showing me and kind of demonstrating how it was standing behind the tree, and it stepped out and looked right at him. And I'm like, well, there's no way that, that she could be mistaken what she's seeing. It's just too close. So I said, was it tall? Was it short? And she said it was a little bit taller than me. And I'm almost pretty close to 5'9". So it, it kind of makes me feel like, he's somewhere, whatever it was close to 6 foot. And, and I was like, oh, well, okay. So we decided to kind of walk down the back side. And when you go down the back side, there's a creek there and things. And, we walked all the way around. And I think is it Camp Rosemary that's up there?
Yeah, Camp Rosalie.
Yeah, Camp Rosalie. And we walked around the trail and came around off the other side. And by then, there wasn't anybody left in the campground. And, and then we kind of decided to go ahead and pack up, start heading home. And then at that time, we got down close to the highway, and Ariel was really, nauseous. And, she felt like she was going to throw up, So, we stopped at the convenience store and got her some, Pepto and stuff. But I was just like, I wonder what's kind of wrong with her. It was almost like she was, had this response to whatever happened to her. But and after that, we just went back home.
Let me ask you a couple questions about that first incident. The screams you described were very similar to what I've heard when I've heard a mountain lion.
That's what I was going to ask too, actually, because I've heard people say that mountain lions in heat sound like babies crying too.
I've heard a mountain lion that sounded exactly the way you described. It sounded like a young woman. It was in my neighborhood in Conifer, a young woman yelling help, to the point where I got in my car, grabbed my gun, got in my car, and drove around the neighborhood looking for someone being raped or murdered. I mean, literally. And it wasn't until I got back in my driveway after going through the neighborhood and seeing nothing, I thought, oh, you idiot, that was a mountain lion screaming.
Sure.
So it could have been the night, could have been a mountain lion, which would drive dogs crazy. But that does not explain what she saw the next morning.
It also explains walking around the tent.
Walking around the tent smelling, could have been a lion. Although you said it sounded like 2 feet, right?
And the other thing is, too, with the lions, that it sounded like there's a bunch of people at the campground.
Right.
So that's kind of, unless they're hungry or, dangerous, that they usually don't come around people.
They usually don't come into the middle of a camp. So that's unusual, but
yeah.
It sounds very much like a mountain lion, but the 2 incidents may be totally unrelated.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot, of course there's no way of knowing for sure.
Right.
But again, I've lived in the mountains. I've heard mountain lions. I've had encounters with mountain lions. And I'm telling you, this was not, it just didn't seem that way, because I was going through every critter I can think of that's in the woods, trying to match that up. I'm going coyotes. I think I got down to squirrels. I couldn't, there was just no comparison, because the volume, it went through to your bones.
Wow.
I've never heard an octave like that. It was really insane to me. And then the other piece is, after our camp trip, we had some conversation, and my mother-in-law finally said something, and she said, well, the trash bag. And I said, yeah, you said something got in the trash. And she said, yeah, there was 4 long flash marks in the bag, and it was almost like it was split open to see what was in it.
Oh.
And you think about, if any other critter in the woods, is going to get in the trash, you're going to see that, everything's strewn all over the campground. There's going to be stuff everywhere.
Right.
And the bag was still intact, just with the slash marks inside of the bag, which I also thought was odd, too, because, you try to go through and rationalize everything that just happened, and I just don't have the answers for some of this. There was just...
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about the trash. I mean, I got hit by a bear not too long ago, and there's still trash in the front yard from it. I can't get up.
Well, my other question, Branden, was, did you have any thought when the girls came running back to go up there right away yourself and see if you could see what they saw?
My thought was my family and protecting them, and not... I actually have to say, after what I experienced through the night, I was really leery about just running up there.
Okay.
You know, with no way to defend
Sure.
ourselves.
Sure.
You know, and I'm just thinking, my gut feeling was like, don't go. And that's why I didn't. I'm like, no, we're going to eat breakfast. And we waited probably about an hour before we went up there.
And just to be clear, I was over there like a month ago. I went hiking. So the ridge goes up to the trail that leads away from the camp. Is that where you were headed?
Yeah, it's really hard to have your bearings between north and south and east and west. But I know when our tent was facing that little ridge, and it's kind of like a hill that you crest.
Right.
And then there's no trail there. There's no trail. It's all forest.
Okay.
There's no
So there is a trail that goes over to Camp Rosalie from Meridian Campground,
right.
But that wasn't that trail.
No.
Okay.
So you go over, and you're walking strictly through the forest.
Okay.
There's no trail there, and then eventually, when you get to the bottom, you run into the creek, and then we followed the creek and ended up meeting up with the trail for Camp Rosalie. And then we took that trail all the way around and came up the backside and over the hill back into Camp Meridian.
Okay.
If that makes sense to you, knowing the terrain.
Yeah. I know your daughter was freaked out by what she saw, but do you know if she felt threatened?
No, she didn't feel threatened. She felt like, I need to show you, Dad, what we saw.
And also, it's interesting. She wanted to go hiking still.
She did, yeah.
Oh, yeah, she wanted, no, Dad, let's go. She was really putting a full court press on that. And I'm like, no. And all of us adults were feeling a little uneasy because really what they're describing to us is, well, a pretty good description of what you would think.
Of a Sasquatch.
What that could be. Yeah. Of a Sasquatch. Now, the question was, and that was the thing, is probably about 2 weeks later, I'm over at my dad's house, and he has a friend over, and, I'd never met him before, and he was helping him do some, maintenance stuff around the house. And I hear them talking about, all kinds of paranormal stuff and whatever, and Bigfoot, and, Sasquatch things, and I said, well, and I tell his friend, I don't really want to just say his name at this point, but I asked him, I said, well, what do you think about this happening to us? And it turns out he's an investigator. And, I tell him the story, and he looked at me and he says, can you take me there? I said, absolutely. I said, when do you want to go? And he goes, right now. I'm like, okay, sure. So then we go trucking up the canyon, and I take him, and, and he kind of was, doing, investigative things and how they do it. And, and then we took the hike and we took the walk, and he was pointing out all kinds of things, like trees being bent over and, all these things. And,
sure.
I found it kind of like, wow, kind of crazy, but, he kind of thought, yeah, I see what you're saying, and so ironically, he had these apples with him, and he put these apples up in this tree in Camp Meridian, and he had me holding the apples, and he's like, and then he had me hand them to him, and he put them up there, and he says, now they know that, they know that they're from you, and it's an offering. And I'm like, and that kind of struck me kind of weird. I'm like, well, okay, and I'm not sure if I want them to know it's me. I'm not. I wish we would have had this discussion before I touched these apples. So, and then we went back, and my dad and his friend went back up, and it's after Labor Day, so the actual campground was closed. And they went up there, and my dad had his camper trailer, and his friend just pitched a tent in the bed of his truck, it sounds like, and he had his girlfriend with him and my stepmom, and they stayed up there overnight, and the next morning I talked to my dad, and he says, I said, well, how was it? Did it go okay, and my dad was like, he says, yeah, I slept like a baby. I'm like, well, that's good. And he goes, but before I went to sleep, you could hear a tree knocking. I'm like, oh, tree knocking? I don't know what that's about, at that time. And he said, we heard some tree knocking, and then I went to sleep. He said, I slept like a baby. He said, Hazel didn't sleep so. That's my stepmom. And they said, I said, well, why is that? And he goes, well, apparently he had a little burro trailer, and it was hooked to his Jeep. And in the middle of the night, something ran up behind the trailer and shoved it and shifted the whole trailer and, pushed the Jeep forward and everything. And I guess it was a really good shove. And I guess my dad kind of flipped through that. But, she was describing how the trailer was just shoved. And she stayed up all night long with her 357 next to her side because it terrified her. And he said, yeah, I don't think she wants to go up there again.
Well, that's interesting.
So,
that is something they do, slapping and pushing and shaking campers and trailers. Same with tents, pushing the tents. But if
that's
what
right.
the girls saw was the Sasquatch, it was a juvenile, obviously, it's 6 feet. So it could have just been curious about them and just wanted to see, because they seem to be fascinated with children. So that doesn't
the
surprise me.
investigator mentioned that too.
Yeah. So that's quite a story. So bring us up to 2015 then, when you went back to the same campground.
Yeah. Well, I was, it took us quite a few years to think about that again. And, and I was trying to make sure, it was 15 or 14. And I'm looking at the timeline, and, I'm like, well, see, my mom bought her house, and I'm thinking it was actually the summer of 14, late August.
Okay.
And, yeah, and we went up there again, and I borrowed a friend's pop-up trailer.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't really sure I wanted to sleep in a total tent this time, going back up there. So for some, reason, I was thinking, this pop-up trailer would be safer when really, if you think about it, But anyway, we had this trailer and pulled into the campground, and we set our camp up right next to the spot that we were at in 2006.
Okay.
And I had my daughter again, and it was my son. And, it was almost like a case of, you know what, kids, let's go face any fear that we have, and let's go there again. So we went up there and set up camp, and I went down to the pay station to pay for that, for our days there. And there was a campground host there. And, he's chatting with us, and he was staying in the first spot right across from the pay station.
This was probably
right
James, I would imagine, back then.
Yeah, I think that's what his name was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounded like he was just kind of, I don't know, originally from California, I think, and he was just staying there for the summer.
Yep.
And in a tent, it was he wasn't like, a lot of campground hosts have like campers and things. He was actually living in a tent.
Yeah, that wouldn't be him.
Yep. Well, so I'm talking about, and nice guy, and he starts asking me as I'm standing at the pay station. He's like, I've heard some things up here, and I've heard some stories. And he says, and he starts alluding to, like people's accounts of, things happening up in the area. And he says, have you ever been here before? And I said, well, ironically, it's the first time since 2006. But yeah, I get what you're saying. My family experienced something really weird back then. And we kind of chatted a little bit briefly about it, but kind of went on with our day, and so we had our camper set up, and doing whatever activities we were doing, and it came time to that at night, for us to kind of go to sleep, and as we're in the camper, I started hearing, in the middle of the night again, started hearing like little pebbles, like hitting the top of the camper. And, like something being thrown on it, you know, and we're, you know, we're not really under any trees or anything that where something would fall out of the tree and land on the camper, you know. It was like, but it was a distinctive sound of like pebbles hitting the top of the camper. And my daughter, I hear her again. She says, "Dad, do you hear that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I hear it, Ari." And she goes, "Why can't they leave us alone? I just want to sleep." And, you know, this kid, she just has no fear on things. It always cracked me up. So, you know, we're hearing these pebbles hit, and she actually hollers out. She goes, "Would you stop? We're trying to sleep." You know? And then, you know, ironically, it stopped shortly after that. Yeah. So, you know, we ended up sleeping through the rest of the night. And, you know, the next morning I realized that our propane tank was out. I mean, the kids got in the car and went down to get a propane tank. That way we could cook breakfast and stuff in the morning. And came back into the campground. And as I'm pulling in, there's James, I believe is his name, right? And he's standing like probably two or three campsites up from where he was staying, and he is like frantically waving at me, like, "Come over here, come over here, come over here." And I'm like, "Geez, what's going on?" You know. So we pull up, and he's standing there, and I see on the ground that there's this, you know, a Forest Service post. You know, they sink into the ground to keep people from backing too far into the campsite.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And it's just laying on the ground, and there's just a hole there. And this man looks like he is slightly unnerved about it. I mean, he was like, and I get out, and he goes, "Do you see this?" I'm like, "Yeah, something pulled the post out of the ground, you know." And he's like, "Yeah, here's the thing. I found the post over there in the tree line." And he said, "I noticed the hole, and I went looking, and I found the post in the tree line, way over there." And he goes, "You can see the drag marks where I dragged it back, because, you know, those things aren't exactly light."
Did it have concrete around the bottom?
He dragged it on the ground back to the... It was just, no concrete. It was just a post.
Okay.
You know, and they just sink it into the ground. But yeah, no concrete. You know, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at this hole, and I'm looking at the post, and I said, "Well, something pulled it out of the ground." And I said, "But they pulled it. It was pulled straight out of the ground." You know, because when we started having a discussion, I'm like, the only way you can get that post out of the ground is if somebody tied a chain or something around it and pulled it out with a truck or some kind of vehicle. And then if that was to happen, then you would see the earth being moved where it was torn out at an angle. Because there's no way you're going to bring it straight out of the ground by pulling it out with a chain. You know? But it was just like, the hole was just, it didn't show any kind of like evidence that thing was pulled from an angle in any way.
Oh, so it was just
and
pulled
there was
straight
no
up like a
markings on the
turnip.
post. None.
How far in the ground was it?
Like straight out like a turnip. Well, I would say it was probably three foot at least.
Jeez.
Wow.
And
that's not easy.
So yeah, and you can see where, you know, where they paint the post.
Yeah.
And you know, you can see they painted it after it had already been sunk into the ground, apparently. So we were, I was helping him actually to try to resync the post. And, you know, we're digging out, we could only get that. That was still probably good 8 to 10 inches from the paint line that we couldn't even sink it in as far as it was before. You know, with quite a bit of effort. And so I'm helping him put this post in, and he's like really just trying to figure this out. We're both, and I'm like, whatever it is has been strong enough to pull it straight out of the ground. And I looked at James and I said, All I know is that's got to require thumbs. Whatever did that has to have thumbs to be able to, grab around it. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. So we put that down, and mind you, the night before is when we had the pebbles hitting the roof of the camper, and he mentioned that actual spot was reserved, and it was from a couple that was from out of state. I'm not sure if they were, Wisconsin or something like that they were from, and they had rented and paid for like 3 nights. And he said that they stayed there one night and bugged out and never came back.
Wow.
And that was, a little bit earlier in the week. Yeah, and they bugged out, and he just thought it was odd because they paid for all these extra days, and they never came back.
So something scared them off, it sounds like.
They just packed up their stuff and left.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was kind of the impression I got, too. Who knows, but, kind of odd.
Jeez.
So...
Sounds like I need to go camp at Camp Meridian if I want to have some experiences.
I just found that everything that's ever happened to us, I always had my kids with me.
Yeah.
I go in the woods by myself and, nothing. But when I had, the kids with me, this is when things would happen to us.
Hey, you want to rent your kids out?
In 2013. Well... Yeah,
use them for Bigfoot magnets.
Well, of course, your kids aren't kids anymore. I'm sure they've grown up.
No, yeah, they're adults now, and but I remember too in like 2000, it was 2013. Me and my brother and this gal that I was dating at the time, and the 2 kids, we decided to go up to Webster Pass. I got a Jeep and my brother's got a 4x4, and she had a Jeep as well. So we went up that 4-wheel drive trail there, towards Webster Pass. And we found a camp spot up there, and it was like Friday night or something. And, as we're setting up camp, it's the sun's setting, it's dusk. And it's just getting dark, and we got a campfire going, and me and my brother, we're standing by the campfire. And again, you heard this scream, and it echoed all the way down the canyon, all the way through there. And my brother just looked at me like, "What the heck was that?" And I said, "I don't know, Dave. You make your own opinion, because I don't want to try to sway him in any way. But I'm pretty sure I know what I heard, and it was just one scream, and And then later that night, my daughter said that she thought she heard something behind the kids' tent in the trees. But I can tell you what, it unnerved my brother enough to where he slept in his Hummer with his 45 next to him, and and I kept teasing him. I said, "Well, if it is what it is," I said, they're known to go right up to your window and look in on you if you're sitting in your car, And I'm teasing him, and he's like, "Shut up." But and that was pretty much all that happened on that trip. And
Webster Pass.
I think
that's over by Fairplay, right? A little closer to Fairplay.
Yeah, it's actually as you're going up Kenosha.
It's before Kenosha.
And it's still on the
Red Cone and Webster Pass are the same area.
Oh, over by the beaver, that big beaver pond over there.
Yeah, you turn off before at the base of Kenosha Pass, and you go off to the right.
So these instances are like miles apart, but the same forest. It's still Pikes National.
Yeah, it's still Bailey area.
Yeah.
285 there. What is that county road? Is it 64 or something?
64, I think, goes back to Webster, yeah.
Yeah.
No, not 64. It's 59, I think. 64 goes between Shawnee and Bailey. But, I know exactly the road you're talking about. I've been back there more than once.
Well, there's that handicap accessible wilderness area over there.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking.
On wheels.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it's right there. There's a county road for that to get up to Webster and Red Cone.
Right.
And that goes over to Montezuma?
Yeah. It goes over Montezuma if you crossed over. Yeah.
So yeah, that's still pretty close. I mean, that's like habitat. You know,
Sure.
It's a mountain lion's habitat.
Yeah. Again, that scream though, it was pretty unnerving. I've heard mountain lions, and it would be a lot easier if I could say it was a mountain lion.
Sure.
Oh yeah,
I can tell you that.
Well, it's pretty clear the girls did not see a mountain lion in 2006.
No, she was very descriptive, and I actually had aerial, and I wish I had this picture still, but I had her draw. I said, "Can you draw me what you saw?" And what I can tell you is that drawing that 12-year-old made was very detailed, and to me, what she drew was hands down a Sasquatch-looking being.
Man,
and she drew it as if it was standing behind the tree and kind of peeping, like out on one leg, and she had the arm drawn and the head, and she even had, the face.
I do wish you had that. That would be that'd be cool to put on the website.
Yes.
Oh man, I wish I had it. I to this day don't know what happened to that, and I'm almost heartbroken nowadays because it was pretty amazing to see this picture that she had drawn.
So, is your daughter still a believer? Does she still believe in Bigfoot?
She does, but I think kind of in her adult life, she's kind of like and now she's in the military, so I think she's kind of a little apprehensive about talking about it nowadays, and she still will, and absolutely she is a believer because there's just no way to deny these events and things that happened throughout her childhood, and and to us, and we had another episode about Boulder too, in Left Hand Canyon, right in the area where the fire is right now.
Oh.
Yeah. And what happened in that incident?
I don't know if you want to. Well, this again, I'm not sure what we were dealing with because there was a lot going on that trip, but it was in July, and I would say it was probably a few weeks after the Webster Pass incident. We decided we wanted to go shooting because, and an area that we used to go to was Left Hand Canyon. Because it's pretty close to the metro area. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever been over there. We lost access to that area after we had those floods go through, some years back, and it washed out the trailhead. But those, I would say it was probably around 2013, that same year. And we went up into Left Hand Canyon, and we wanted to do some wheeling and some shooting. And it was me and Julie again, my friend, and then the two kids. And we go up the 4x4 trail. And, right at the entrance, there was a shooting range there. And it was, packed with people. And so we decided to go up further up the trail. And we turn on the first switchback, and we see this man walking down the trail, down the road. And he looked like he was like like he could be with the Forest Service or something. It seemed like he was wearing that, tan type, greenish, like Nomex type clothing.
Right.
And, your first thought was, is he a forest ranger? But there was no patches or insignias on anything. And he's walking down, and I remember that he was, fairly dark complected, almost like Native American type features. But he had this really like ice blue eyes, and he, you kind of pass somebody, you wave at him and kind of nod your head, acknowledging him there, and he just kind of gave us this cold stare as we passed him. I thought, well, that was kind of creepy, and my friend Julie, she was like, yeah, that's, but we all just kind of got a weird vibe from that guy. So then we just kicked the trail, and there's another gun range, and it had a lot of people. So we went to the top, pardon me, top gun range. And nobody was there. We'd been shooting there before, and we go to that range, and we get our stuff all ready, and there's people about four-wheeling and, ATVs and things, and, and in this shooting range, there's there's a hill that you shoot into. And then just to the left of it is this, like meadow. And we start shooting in the hill and whatnot. And I just kept feeling like, what the heck, you know, because off to my right and out of the corner of my eyes, it's almost like I was catching some movement. And, you know, and I'm starting to get concerned about that, you know, because I don't want to be shooting and something being in the way, you know, and being in our line of fire.
Sure.
And I noticed that when Julie was shooting, she'd stop and kind of glance off to the same area. And then Ari was doing the same thing. And, you know, and at first none of us said anything. And then finally it was like, you know, I looked to us, are you seeing something up there? And she goes, yeah, it's like out of the corner of your eye. And I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing it too. You know, and it only seemed to be when you're pulling the trigger, you know. So we decided, you know, that we would, you know, go investigate that. And meanwhile, during this time, you know, we noticed this deer just kind of like show up in the meadow, like kind of out of nowhere. And it was kind of odd with the deer because it was like the gunfire didn't affect it. You know, it didn't make it jump. It didn't make it want to run or do anything like that. You know, it seemed like just right as rain, like no problem. And you know, that kind of struck me kind of odd. And the deer takes off. So we decide that we're going to go up the hill and look and investigate to see if there's anything up there.
And how far away from where you were shooting were you seeing the movement?
It was at the top of the hill. I would probably say, you know, 100 yards.
Okay.
You know, I'm trying to think. It's, you know.
It wasn't in the line of fire. It was off to one side?
Yeah, it was off to one side. But whatever it is, it just seemed like it was just, you catch that movement just kind of in your peripheral, you know, and then you look over there and there's nothing there.
Okay.
You know? So Julie and my daughter, they go running up the hill. And I'm trying to, you know, I got my 45 on my hip and I'm like, my AR, and I'm trying to put a magazine in the AR. And I'm like, stop, wait, because you don't know what you're going to run into up there. You know, it could be a mountain lion, it could be a bear, it could be, you know, who knows. Just hold on, you know. And they go tearing up the hill, so I'm trying to rush to get behind them. And I go up the hill, and at this point, my daughter's standing on top of the hill, and on the backside, it's all forest, and it goes down on the backside, you know, with another slope. And so I get up there, and she's up there with our digital camera, and here's my kid again. She yells out into the woods. She says, I know you're here, and you know we're here. And she says, so I'm just going to take some pictures, and if you want to be in my pictures, that's fine. And I'm thinking, what the heck, Ari, you know? And she just starts taking these random shots. And meanwhile, we're looking around. We're not seeing anything at all. You know, it was just kind of nothing there. So we're starting to get to the point where, you know, we're going to head down the hill. We went up. It was way late afternoon, you know, evening. And, you know, it's starting to get dark at this point. You know, the sun's starting to set. And we decided to, you know, maybe go back down and start shooting again for a little bit more. And we're standing at the top of the hill, and Ari's still kind of doing her thing and looking around in the trees and out in the woods. And then Julie and I turn around and look, and out of nowhere, it's that same guy that we saw on the way in. And he's just standing there. And at this point, you know, I'm up on the hill. I have you know, I can see the whole area. I have a good vantage point. You know, I can see everything. And there's one road in and one road out. And, you know, the 4x4 road. And the gun range is located kind of on the switchback, you know, and you see the road switch back and go right back up and then up further up the mountain. And this guy's standing there, and Julie, she's like, our stuff, you know, because all of our ammunition and our other guns and stuff is all down there. She takes off down the hill, and I'm kind of standing in between, trying to keep an eye on Julie and keep an eye on my daughter. You know, at the same time, I'm like, Ari, come on, we got to go. And I looked down, and she got down there, and the guy was there. And she said all that the guy said to her was just passing through, and it really monotone, and which, you know, really kind of struck her odd. And, you know, and then she looked back up at me, apparently, after this man said that. And I looked up at Ari, looked back again, and we both looked, and the guy's gone. He's completely gone. Don't have any idea where this man went. And I can see the whole area. And we're just thinking, whoa, you know, where did he go? So we go back down the hill, and, you know, we're like, well, that's weird, but, you know, there's a chance, you know, I don't know. He can't explain it, but we decided to keep doing what we were doing. And so we start shooting again, and there was these trees off to our right. And we're shooting, and all of a sudden you just start hearing what we described as like a low guttury yell, like growling. And it was like really low tone. And it was like, and then like that. And again, right through the bone. And I'm like, good grief. You know, we kind of stopped shooting, and Ari, every time she would talk out, like, what are you doing? And she's talking. and it would respond to her with that same guttural, growling, vocalization type thing, you know, and all, you know, we're all standing there looking at each other, and again, Julie's like, what is that? I'm like, I don't know. And Ari's like, you know what it is, Dad. I'm like, Ari?
And was the sound coming from where the guy had been at the top of the hill, or where was the sound?
The sound was actually coming from the side where we saw something out of our peripheral.
Okay.
When we were shooting. So if you were looking downrange to the hill, it was off to the right side.
Okay.
And now the tree line had come around close to where we were standing from that ridge, and it was coming right from that tree line to our right. So, you know, at this point I'm thinking, all right, you know what? It's time to pack up. It's time to pack our stuff up. You know, and the sun's setting, and we're like, we get everything back in the Jeep, and thinking to ourselves, you know, but none of us really wanted to go. We were having a good time, but it was like, wow. I don't know. We decided, well, you know what? Let's go a little bit further up the trail, and, you know, and do a little bit of wheeling. And so we get back in the Jeep, and before we're leaving, Ari was like, she wanted to leave a piece of candy on a post. Like, and it was like a warhead or something, you know. It was something that's probably not real palatable for even human consumption, but she wanted to leave this, you know, this piece of candy, and she goes, I'm going to leave it for, you know, for our friend. And I'm like, okay, Ari, you know, let's get in the Jeep, let's go. And she leaves a piece of candy, and she gets to the Jeep, and we start going up that switchback again. And you go up, and it's all 4x4 trail. And eventually you get up to an area where there's a Y. And the Forest Service has signs, you know, up there, you know, those sign marquees that they put up, you know, and they got Smokey the Bear there. And then they had a trail map of all the trails, and which ones were ATV and which ones were Jeep. And, you know, and so we're pulling up to that area. And as we're pulling up, there's that guy again. Wow. And mind you, there is not a soul around.
That would have creeped me out
at this point. There's nobody there. Well, it was really super creepy. And he's standing there, and all he does is he bends down and he picks up a rock off the ground, and he starts rubbing it like, you know, like you would a coin or a quarter or something, you know. And he's rubbing it, and he's just staring at it as we're kind of like slowly going by him. And I looked at Julie, I said, you know what, let's go. It's time to go. Things are just too weird. We got to go. She's like, yeah. And at that point, it was just a matter of seconds. And I go and I put the Jeep in reverse, and I look back to back up, and he's gone again. He's completely gone again. And there's nowhere to go, Jim, nowhere to go. And I'm thinking, well, he must have went walking down the road. So we start heading down the road, and at this point, it's getting pretty dark, you know. And I flip my trail lights on, and we're going down the hill, and we get all the way back down to the gun range. And my daughter, she was like, Dad, I want to see if it got my warhead, my candy. I was like, okay. You know, we stop for a minute. She jumps out. She goes to see, and the candy's still there. And at that point, you know, the front of the Jeep's facing my daughter, and she's over just off to our right at the post. And then to the left is the gun range in the meadow. And it's dark. And, you know, Ari's in my headlights, and I'm watching her, and Julie says, what is that? And I look over to my left, and there's this, like a light. Like, and I was thinking, you know, it's like an LED headlamp or something, you know, that somebody would wear on their head. And it starts moving towards my kid. And the odd part was it wasn't going up or down, and, you know, and it's uneven terrain there. So if it was like something like that, you know, you would think it would move up and down if somebody would take a step. It was just going straight across directly, and it was headed straight for my kid. And I'm like yelling to Ari, get back in the Jeep, get back in the Jeep. I pull my console open, I pull my 45 out, and I put a bead on this light because, you know, it's going right at my daughter. Ari starts running back to the Jeep, and then she steps in a rut and twists her ankle. And we're like, get in. Seth opens the door, and she kind of dives. Yeah, it was crazy. And she dives into the back of the Jeep. Julie's going, go, go, go. I backed it up as fast as I can, and we start heading down the trail. Because at this point, we're all pretty terrified, you know, about what's happening. So we go down, start heading down the trail. I'm going as fast as I can, but, you know, we have to slow up to clear boulders and obstacles. And this light is following us all the way down the road. It's right behind us, like 16th of a mile behind us. And it's just steady, and it's keeping pace with us. And at points, you know, I'm doing 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. And then we'd have to slow up a little bit. And then, you know, depending on the terrain. And we're going all the way back down the canyon and this trail, and this thing is behind us the entire way. So then we finally get down to the bottom, to the first gun range, and you have to make that switch back. And we're coming out, and there's some really big boulders at the time that you had to clear right at the entrance. And I'm seeing the light above us to our right coming down the trail. And I'm thinking, well, it's still got to do the switch back and come back around to catch us. And at this point, the light just comes over the hill, and it comes straight. It's coming straight at us down this steep hill, right at us. And, you know, Julie's screaming at me, go, go, go. And I'm trying to clear these big boulders. And we finally get out, and I gun it across the 2-lane highway. And there's not a car around. There's not a motorcycle. There's not a bicycle. There's no campers. The whole area is completely deserted. And which I found kind of odd, too, because you're just thinking, what else could this be, you know? There's nobody there. We get across the road. I get it out of 4-wheel drive, and we head down the highway. And don't look back. And it was such an amazing event that even a few years ago, I'm still friends with Julie, and she messaged me randomly, and she's like, "Do you remember Left Hand Canyon?" And I was like, "How can you forget?"
I've heard one story like yours, where people were there, then they weren't there, then they showed up again somewhere else, were too far for them to have walked in the span of time that had passed. And they were Native Americans. Yeah. And the person in that story said, I feel like that was a skinwalker, or they were skinwalkers. And
well, when we got to that Y, and I saw him that third time, just out of nowhere in my head, that exact word popped into my head. was Skinwalker. I have no idea why. I have no clue why I even thought that, but that's what popped into my head, and and that was really kind of freaked me out. So, the question was, because I had talked to another investigator, had called me about that, and I told him the story, and he said he thought the same thing because he'd interviewed a lot of Native Americans, and that maybe what it might have been. And my question was, was that a Sasquatch? Because it sounded like it's Sasquatch, and was the Skinwalker trying to protect us from this? If that's what that was, protect us from the Sasquatch, or was the Sasquatch trying to, because I don't know. And Chuck thought it was the Sasquatch was trying to alert us and protect us from whatever that man was. That would be him, yeah.
Yeah, I know Chuck. Well, who knows? I mean, that is a bizarre story, to say the least. I mean, even the light. Who can explain the light that was following you? You sound like a guy who has a lot of experiences when you go out.
Yeah, maybe it's not the kids that's the Bigfoot magnet.
Yeah, maybe
it's you.
Well, I'm wondering, because y'all know I worked on the ambulance up there, and there was one night I went out on a call. Even then, this was after I touched the apple. I don't know if it's related to that or not, but in those days, being a medic, I'd be the only one in the station, and I'd come back from a call about 3 a.m, and it's that fire station there right off 285 is where we were, and there used to be Tooley's Pizza there, and the Shell gas station in those days.
Yeah.
You know where I'm talking, right next to the, before they did all the road work over there. And I'm coming into the station, and it's, is that Delwood?
Yeah.
I don't remember so many years ago. But, so I'm pulling in the ambulance, coming up the road. I dropped off the volunteer that ran the call with me. And as I'm coming up that frontage road, I see this coyote take off, and it's running like it's on a mission. And it goes darting in front of me and then across the road, and it heads into the meadow in front of the fire station. And I was like, "Oh wow, coyote!" And pull the ambulance up. I back it up the driveway, and I put it in the ambulance in the bay. And I get out, and I go to walk around to close the door, and as I get to the front of the ambulance, I hear this guttural scream, and it was like, again, really low tone, and it was like, "Ugh!" And I'm standing there, like all the hair raised up on the back of my neck, and it echoes all the way down the canyon towards the loafing jug. You know where I'm talking?
Yeah.
And it seemed to be up on that ridge there behind Tooley's Pizza. And I'm looking around, and of course I don't see anything. But boy, it scared the poo out of me. And I shut that garage, and I went back into the station, and I sat in the middle of the room in that station in a recliner. I didn't want to go into the bed, and I spent the rest of the night in that recliner in the middle, because I was just like, I don't know what that is. It was just outside the station, So, it's just, and here's the thing, that's the only thing that's ever happened to me by myself.
Huh.
Everything else has been with the kids. So I'm not sure.
Well,
we're going to have to wrap it up here, but man, if you ever have any more stories, you should give us a call back so we can talk more about it, man. That's great.
This was very interesting, and the combination of the Sasquatch and then this maybe Skinwalker, bizarre.
That on top of the fact that you guys are kind of creeping me out, because that's like the last story just took place half a mile from here.
Yes, exactly.
So you gave me a lot to think about.
Well, we really appreciate you being on with us, Branden.
Well, I appreciate it, and guys, have fun up there.
Oh yeah, seems like it's target-rich environment.
Yes, it is. We will,
I think probability's high up there in Bailey. I tell you.
Yeah, we've had a lot of experiences up here, and if you listen to our podcast, we've talked about a lot of things that have happened up here. So we're going to sign off, but we just want to say thank you again, Branden, and we appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Yeah, that guy is. A lot of stuff happens with him. I mean, that's very interesting. That's a lot to take in.
It is. It is.
I mean, I don't know about the Skinwalker thing. Like, that's never anything that I could.
Like I said, I've heard one story, and it was a weird story, and had to do with Native Americans but there's the whole Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. That's just the center of all kinds of bizarre.
Oh yeah, they made a show about that recently.
They did. It was quite bizarre. So, yeah, that last story was a combo. That light, I don't know what that light was. Sounds like an orb, but it didn't make them feel very happy. They wanted to get out of there.
So, are you familiar with what the researcher he was talking about did, where he was kind of like marked, like with the apple? Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not sure what he was talking about as far as you've touched the apple. Now they know it's you. We get all kinds of researchers, like we get all kinds of phenomena. So
just another technique somebody probably uses.
Yeah, I do know Chuck, who we mentioned at the end, and Chuck does a lot of paranormal investigations and things like that. So, I mean, that's just bizarre. That was quite a collection of stories he had.
Well, I mean, I'm halfway there with him on this one. Like, it seems like there's a lot of indicators that something went on at the campground.
Right.
Because the way everyone was bugging out. I'm sorry, my dogs just ran by and barked real quick.
That's okay.
But yeah, that whole scenario was very peculiar. I like his daughter drew a picture.
Right.
That's very.
Yeah.
So what do you guys got going on at the store? You got anything going on lately?
No, we've been extremely busy. I mean, this whole COVID season, we thought was going to be a completely dead time, and we have been slammed. We've broken all kinds of daily records of people in the store. I think it's because Colorado people stayed home. They didn't travel this summer, so I know all the trails, all the campgrounds broke records around the state for attendance and occupation. So, yeah, I think a lot of people came to the store that wouldn't otherwise have come, perhaps, and it's been great. We've had lots of incredible conversations with people. So,
well, I mean, plug. You guys are really conveniently right off the highway.
We are.
You're easy to get to and easy to see. So, yeah, man. I mean, the way the traffic's been in, I imagine you guys have been.
Yeah, and maybe in our next episode I'll tell you about some of the things we've added to the museum recently. But it's been a great summer, that's all I can say, and I'm grateful for it.
That's good. All right, well, that was a full episode today. I say we wrap it with that and let people think about what they heard.
I agree.
All right,
as
guys.
they're thinking about it, let's not forget that you don't know Squatch.
That's right.